Of Mice and Men by John Steinbeck. Sorry if that beginning was way too loud, guys. A few miles south of Soledad, the Salinas River drops in close to the hillside bank and runs deep and green. The water is warm, too, for it has slipped twinkling over the yellow sands in the sunlight before reaching the narrow pool. On one side of the river, the golden foothill slopes curve up to the strong and rocky Gablian Mountains, but on the valley side, the water is lined with trees. Willows fresh and green with every spring, carrying their lower leaf junctures the breeze of the winter's flooding, and sycamores with molted white recumbent limbs and branches that arch over the pool. On the sandy bank under the trees, the leaves lie deep and so crisp that a lizard makes a great skittering if he runs among them. Rabbits come out of the brush to sit on the sand in the evening, and the damp flats are covered with night tracks of coons and with the spread pads of dogs from the ranches and the split wedge tracks of deer that come to drink in the dark. There is a path through the willows and among the sycamores, a path beaten hard by the boys coming down from the ranches to swim in the deep pool, and beaten hard by tramps who come wearily down from the highway in the evening to jungle up near the water. In the front of the low horizontal limb of a giant sycamore, there is an ash pile made by many fires. The limb is worn smooth by men who have sat on it. This is the setup of the novel, or I should say, the setup of the setting for the first chapter of the novel. It's trying to make it picturesque and beautiful. It's trying to make it more beautiful than it will be in a few moments. Evening of a hot day started the little wind to moving among the leaves. The shade climbed up the hills towards the top. On the sandbanks, the rabbits sat as quietly as the little gray, sculptured stones. And then from the direction of the state highway came the sound of footsteps on crisp sycamore leaves. The rabbits hurried noisily for cover. A stilted heron labored up into the air and pounded downriver. For a moment the place was lifeless. And then two men emerged from the path and came into the opening by the green pool. They had walked in single file down the path, and even in the open, one stayed behind the other. Both were dressed in denim trousers and in denim coats with brass buttons. Both wore black, shapeless hats and carried tight blanket rolls slung over their shoulders. The first man was small and quick, dark of face, with restless eyes and sharp, strong features. Every part of him was defined. Small, strong hands, slender arms, a thin and tiny and bony nose. Behind him walked his opposite, a huge man, shapeless of face, with large pale eyes and with wide, sloping shoulders, and he walked heavily, dragging his feet a little, the way a bear drags his paws. His arms did not swing at his sides, but hung loosely. The first man stopped short in the clearing, and the follower nearly ran over him. He took off his hat and wiped the sweatband with his forefinger and snapped the moisture off. His huge companion dropped his blankets and flung himself down and drank from the surface of the green pool, drank with long gulps, snorting into the water like a horse. The small man stepped nervously beside him. Lenny, he said sharply. Lenny, for God's sakes, don't drink so much. Lenny continued to snort into the pool. The small man leaned over and shook him by the shoulder. Lenny, you're gonna be sick like you was last night. Lenny dipped his whole head under, hat and all. And then he sat up on the bank, and his hat dripped down onto his blue coat and ran down his back. Oh, that's good, he said. You drank some, George. You drank big. He smiled happily. George unslung his bindle and dropped it gently onto the bank. I ain't sure this is good water, he said. Looks kinda scummy. Lenny dabbled his big paw in the water and wiggled his fingers so that the water arose in little splashes. Rings widened across the pool to the other side and came back again. Lenny watched them go. Look, George, look what I done. George knelt beside the pool and drank from his hand with quick scoops. Tastes all right. Don't really seem to be running, though. You never ought to drink water that ain't running, Lenny, he said hopelessly. You'd drink the water out of a gutter if you was thirsty. He threw a scoop of water into his face and rubbed it about with his hand under his chin and around the back of his neck. Then he replaced his hat, pushed himself back from the river, drew up onto his knees, and embraced them. Lenny, who had been watching, imitated George exactly. He pushed himself back, drew up his knees, embraced them, looked over to George to see whether he had done it just right. He pulled his hat down a little more over his eyes, the way George's hat was. George stared morosely at the water. The rims of his eyes were red with sun glare. He said angrily, "We could have just as well rode that road clear to the ranch if that bastard bus driver knew what he was talking about. Just a stretch down the highway, he says. Just a stretch. Goddamn near 4 miles, that's what it was. Didn't want to stop at the ranch gate, that's what. Too goddamn lazy to pull it off. Wonder he isn't too damn good to stop at the Soledad at all. Kicks us out and says, just a little stretch down the road. Yeah, I bet it was more than 4 miles. Damn hot day." Lenny looked timidly over to him. "George?" "Yeah, what do you want?" "Where are we going, George?" The little man jerked down the brim of his hat and scowled at Lenny. "So you forgot that already, did you? Well, I gotta tell you again, do I? Jesus Christ, you're a crazy bastard." I forgot," Lenny said softly. I tried not to forget. Just honest to God, I did, George." Okay. Well, I'll tell you again. I ain't got nothing to do. Might as well just spend all my time telling you things and then you forget them. And I'll tell you again. "Tried and tried," said Lenny. "But it didn't do no good. I remember about the rabbits, George." "Not to hell with the rabbits. That's all you can ever remember is them rabbits. Oh, okay. Now you listen, and this time you gotta remember so we don't get in no trouble. You remember sitting in the gutter on Howard Street and watching the blackboard?" Lenny's face broke into a delighted smile. "Oh, sure, George. I remember that. But what'd we do then? I remember some girls came by, and you say, the hell with what I says. You remember about us going to Murray and Reddy's, and they give us work cards and bus tickets?" "Oh, sure, George. I remember that now." His hands went quickly to his side pockets. He said gently, "George, I ain't got mine. I must have lost it." He looked down at the ground in despair. "You never had one, you crazy bastard. I got both of them here. Think I'd let you carry your own work card?" I thought I put it in my side pocket." His hand went to the pocket again. George looked sharply at him. "What'd you take out of that pocket?" "Well, ain't a thing in my pocket," Lenny said cleverly. "I know there ain't. You got it in your hand. What you got in your hand hiding it?" "Oh, I ain't got nothing, George. Honest. Come here. Give it here." Lenny held his hand away from George's direction. "It's only a mouse, George." "A mouse? A live mouse?" Just a dead mouse, George. I didn't kill it, honest. I found it dead." "Give it here," said George. "Oh, let me have it, George." "Give it here." If you, as a regular member of society, or that's not exactly the right way, but a regular member of 21st century society has gone, "Why is this person carrying a dead mouse with them?" I would understand that. I would also bring it to your attention. A lot of people do go off and find dead things and then make taxidermy out of them, but this man does not seem to be doing that, so this is a little bit strange. Let's continue. Lenny's closed hands slowly obeyed. George took the mouse and threw it across the pool to the other side, among the brush. What do you want with a dead mouse anyways? Oh, I could just pet it with my thumb while we walked along, said Lenny. Well, you ain't petting no mice while you walk with me. You remember where we're going now? Lenny looked startled and then embarrassed and put his face against his knees. No, I forgot again. Jesus Christ, George said resignedly. Well, look, we're gonna work on a ranch like the one we just came from up north. Up north? Yeah, in Weed. Oh, sure, I remember, in Weed. That ranch we're going to is right down there, about a quarter mile. We're gonna go in and see the boss. Now, look, I'll give him the work tickets, but you ain't gonna say a word. You just sit there and don't say nothing. If he finds out what a crazy bastard you are, we won't get no job. But if he sees that you can work before he hears you, we're set. You got that? Sure, George. Sure, I got it. Okay, now, when we go and see the boss, what are you gonna do? And he thought, his face grew tight with thought. I ain't gonna say nothing, just gonna stand there. Good boy, that's swell. You get that over 2 or 3 times, so make sure you don't forget it. Lenny droned to himself softly. I ain't gonna say nothing. I ain't gonna say nothing. I ain't gonna say nothing. Okay, said George. And you ain't gonna do bad things like you done in Weed, neither. Lenny looked puzzled. Like I done in Weed? Oh, so you forgot that too, did you? Well, I ain't gonna remind you, fear you do it again. A light of understanding broke on Lenny's face. Oh, they run us out of Weed, he exploded triumphantly. Reminder, Weed is a place in Soledad. I'm not in Soledad, in California. It's a town. They were run out of a town. Just before I have all of, like, the 8th graders giggling at this. Run us out, hell, said George disgustedly. We run. They was looking for us, but they did not catch us. Lenny giggled happily. Yeah, I didn't forget that, you bet. George lay back in the sand and crossed his hands under his head. Lenny imitated him, raised his head to see whether he was doing it just right. God, you're a lot of trouble, said George. I could get along so easy and so nice if I didn't have you on my tail. I could live so easy, maybe even have a girl. For a moment, Lenny lay quiet, and then he said, hopefully, "We gonna work on the ranch, George?" All right, you got that. But we're gonna sleep here because I got a reason. The day was going fast now. Only the tops of the Delaney mountains flamed with the light of the sun that had gone from the valley. A water snake slipped among the pool, its head held like a little periscope. The reeds jerked slightly in the current. Far off towards the highway, a man shouted something. Another man shouted back. The sycamore limbs rustled under a little wind that died immediately. George, why ain't we going to the ranch and get some supper? They got supper at the ranch. Oh, George rolled to his side. No reason at all for you. I just like it here. Tomorrow we're gonna go to work. I've seen threshing machines on the way down. That means we'll be bucking grain bads again, busting the gut. Tonight, I'm gonna lay right here and look up. I like it. Then he got up on his knees and looked down at George. Ain't we gonna have no supper? Sure we are. If you can gather up some dead willow sticks. I got 3 cans of beans in my bindle. You get a fire ready. I'll give you a match when you get the sticks together. Then we'll heat the beans and have some supper. Lenny said, I like beans with ketchup. Well, we ain't got no ketchup. You get the wood, and don't you fool around, it'll be dark before long.